there's something really special about giving yourself constructive criticism where you're teaching yourself and you can feel yourself growing as you do this for more and more episodes. And you can feel these skills you're learning.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
There's a lot of people who know that podcasting will grow their business. But, that editing piece, that's a huge waste of time for most of us. We need to get out and work on the business, not in it. So that's why we have Max today. Max started to host a podcast called the Wild Business Growth Podcast. And when you look it up, yes, it's the one with the big old hippo on it with the sunglasses. That's the one. You'll type in on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this show, Wild Business Growth Podcast, and you'll see that hippo, the hungry hippo, eating the words. That's Max's podcast. Go ahead and subscribe to it. Today, we are going to learn from him a couple things about Max besides just having that podcast. He started, after a little while, he started a own little business. I say little, but maybe it's huge by the time this episode comes out. He started his own podcast post-production business. And so some of the things that we're going to pull out from him is just to help you to know what to look for with a podcast post-production company, or if you're going to be doing it yourself, a couple of tips that are going to help you to excel a little bit easier. And what's kind of cool about him is he started out as a podcaster. He started out himself as a podcaster. He learned the audio engineering on the back end. So instead of being an audio engineering geek that doesn't know what it's like to podcast, he's a podcasting geek that just learned what it is to take to do all the audio engineering. So it's going to be really exciting to go through this. One quick thing is he started in corporate America, then he started working with a family business. In the pre-interview, he was saying that, now he's doing his own business. And so he's not sure what his next step is since he's always getting a bit smaller. But I can't wait to see your podcast post-production business take off. It's called MaxPodcasting.com. Super easy. Max Podcasting, that's his name. That's the name of the company. It's brilliant. So the first question that I have for you, Max, is who do you serve? How do you make money from them, working with them? And then how does the podcast tie into all of that?
Yeah. Well, Adam, thank you so much for having me. I was going to correct you earlier because you said, well, I'm not actually an audio engineer geek. And I thought you were going to say that I'm not a geek at all. I'm definitely a geek. I'm a podcasting geek. I'm a sports geek. I'm all sorts of geeks. So, but this is really cool. So who do I serve? I serve small business owners who know that a podcast can do great things for their brand and for their marketing in particular. But they know it is by no means in their best interest to do all the minute details and spend all the time behind the scenes that it takes, as you know, to make a podcast work and to make it successful. So that's who I serve. How do I monetize? And that is all through what I call the 3 Ps of podcasting. So what I provide is planning, production, and promotion. So I help those small business owners with the planning of their podcast if they're starting from scratch, the production on the typically week-to-week basis, and that's mainly the editing parts of it, and then the promotion, which involve detail, keyword-rich show notes, focus for SEO, as well as audiograms, ways you can promote the podcast, as you know very well. So that's how I monetize. And how does my podcast help? Well, that's been a really fun journey is, as you mentioned, Wild Business Growth Podcast. That started out at, that's how I first got into podcasting myself, and it was a way to market the family business. And so I started podcasting every single week. Since my podcasting journey has evolved into Max Podcasting and a whole separate production company, I've since brought that podcast over, and that continues to be the podcast now for Max Podcasting. And it's really turned into a giant sizzle reel because it's something that I'm doing every single week. And I think whatever you're doing in life, whatever you're doing professionally, it helps to keep working on your craft on that particular end. So for me, if I'm going to keep working in the podcast production space, it 100% helps to keep having my own podcast and to keep interviewing guests and fascinating people. And so I still put out episodes every single Wednesday morning. Been doing it for 100 plus episodes, keep doing that every Wednesday. And it's a ton of fun as well. So I think it's one of the I hate these cliches, but I think the proof is in the pudding. Like when you do that and people see you're doing it and they like what they hear, then they might be more likely to work with you, or they might just enjoy hearing the podcast. So it's a lot of fun. It's kind of win-win there.
Great. I've got so many questions for you, and I really want to just jump in and start with the content, and then I've got a few more questions queued up that I think are going to help us get to know you a little bit better as well. But first off, because your business is with the three P's, I guess, which is planning, production, and promotion. Is that right?
Yes, yes. This
Okay.
You didn't know you were signing up for a spelling bee with me, did
No,
you?
I didn't. I didn't. So with these three things, with the promotion, and that's a big part of your business, the post-production on these podcasts, I think that there's going to be two main listeners that we have today. The first listener is listening to the show and they've got their own show. Their intention is growing the show. Their intention might be that they have enough money now to finally say, I'm tired of this shiz. I don't want to, do my own promotion anymore. And I'm going to hire somebody. I just want to find out, what do they need to look out for when they're hiring a post-production company? What are the keys that help you understand if you're working with a quality company? And on the flip side, I think the other listener is somebody who might not even have their podcast launched yet. And they might not have a budget for it, or they don't think they have a budget for it. We all have a budget as soon as we've tried it. As soon as we tried it, it's like nothing's worth this. I could be paying anyone, to do this. But you know how a lot of us, we're getting into podcasting and we don't think that we have a budget for it. We don't want to do it. We say we can just kind of do that ourselves. What are a couple of key tangible takeaways that listener can take on so that they can actually start editing their own show and doing a better job? So let's start with a person who has money, wants to hire. How do they know who to hire?
Yeah, and it's a phenomenal question because there are so many podcast producers, so many podcast editors out there. I mean, it's a growing space. Podcasting itself is such a growing space that it's no surprise that more people are getting involved in kind of the service side, the helping out side. I think the biggest thing you have to look for comes down to the actual quality of the service that's being provided. And in the podcasting world, that comes down to, okay, well, how's the quality of the actual episodes that they're editing? So when you're looking at somebody's site and you're evaluating a potential editor, podcast producer, look to see what testimonials they have, look to see who they work with, and a few quick podcasts that you can check out an episode or two and see, okay, does this sound, would I be happy if my podcast had this level of quality on it? And what's great in the podcasting space is literally, it's free to listen to episodes like that. You don't need to listen to all the episode in entirety, but take 5, 10, 15 minutes and just listen to a single episode for some of their top clients and think if you'd be happy with that. So I think that's the first thing to evaluate it. The second thing, which is really, really important and something that I try to, demonstrate right away when I'm talking to a potential client, is find someone that you want to work with, that's fun working with, that you would enjoy being in communication with. It could be up to several times a week when they're delivering that final edited episode, that final product for you. Because if it's somebody that you have a great relationship and you get excited just to email them or just to say, hey, can you edit this thing? Or all right, let's take that out next time. Little things like that. It's just going to go much farther for your partnership. It's going to be reflected in your final episode. And you might even find yourself more energized about your own podcast. So it's really, really key. I'd say those are the top two things: evaluate their content and find someone who you would enjoy working with.
Awesome. Well, some of my key takeaways, I mean, you definitely mentioned, not in so many words, but that it's important to know them, like them, and trust them. It's
Right.
kind of interesting. I think that because when you're talking about, the first thing is the quality, that makes us know if we can trust them at all, if they're putting out good quality. And you mentioned that evaluation process really took two main things. And the first one that I really appreciated that you said was, looking for testimonials, looking for clients that they've worked with to see kind of what they're saying about the company, first and foremost. And if that passes and you see good stuff, then you take that extra step to kind of listen to examples on your own. So you can go to those podcasts and literally listen to them and just say, like you said, you proposed a question. Is this the type of quality that I want my podcast to have? And so I really liked that. And what was interesting is that's the trust part. That's the know part. They're out there. You trust them. You see their work. You see the quality. But that like part it seems to be important to you as well. And I think that makes a lot of sense. With all of our businesses, we want to work with somebody that we get along with, someone that we can resonate with, someone that we can communicate with. And there's all sorts of different types of podcast production teams out there. Some of them are in this country or that country or that country. Some of them focus on this, that, or that. So it's going to be important that you have a relationship with them. You can communicate with them. You understand them. And maybe when it comes down to it, if you're visiting the city that they're in, it might be fun to just go and have a drink with them, grab some lunch or whatever. So I think that's something that I doubt I would have gotten from that question. I doubt I would have got that same answer from any other guest ever. So very insightful. And I like people that I resonate with, that I can connect with. And I think that that's a cool thing when you have a podcast, to know that something for the listener they can take away as well, how critical it is for them to be themselves. Like with you, Max, it's easy to get along with you. It's easy to communicate with you. It's easy to have you on the show and just kind of shoot the breeze and feel confident and comfortable that you're not going to judge me, and that, that you're not trying to be somebody that you're not, and things like that. And that's going to help you and I to be able to connect. And if the listener's connecting with us on this episode and we provide a service that they like, then they're more likely to be able to say, let me hire them. And that's the same thing for the listener. When I was going to say something that they could take away from it, is how critical it is for them when they're on their own show. And I hope you agree. When the listener has their own show, that they need to be their authentic, true self, because nobody's going to resonate with them if they're being somebody that they're not, or if they're trying to be somebody that goes outside of their whatever, and outside of their natural, normal habitat, if you will. Because I believe that human beings, we're really good at sensing discrepancies or dissonance within other humans. And in general, when somebody's trying to be too perfect or too mature or too wearing a suit, but it doesn't fit them, we don't know what we can think about them. But, we just know something's off. But when they are who they are, and you're the listener now, but you have your own show and you're being who you are, your avatar, the person listening to your show, is going to be more likely to be able to start doing business with you. If you're a coach, if you're a consultant, if you're a mentor, if you have what are those called? If you have a series of education, a paid, what is that called? A course. Thank you, Max.
Of course,
I saw it in your. Of course, it was. It was a course.
We're just finishing each other's sentences.
Yes. Say that again. We're finishing what?
Each other's
sentences. Did it?
Bam.
Boom. That was very romantic. So
that's what I strive for.
So if you're listening and you're going to be putting out a course, if you're going to be being a mentor, if you want to do business with your listener, the best way to do that is to be who you are. I do this in a weird way on my social media. Like, instead of cramming it down people's throat that I do podcast, I help people market their podcasts. Instead of like throwing that out all the time on social, I'll talk about my kids on social. I'll talk about mountain biking on social, because I really want people to know that I'm a person, and that I have interests and hobbies and a family, and that I care about those types of things, my health, etc. And I think that resonates with people more than just saying, I can help you promote your podcast or market it or whatever, get more listeners, more downloads, etc. Just really talk about the you-ness. So anyway, huge takeaway from what you were mentioning, because you want to be able to want to work with that type of person. So huge when we're looking up a podcast promotion company, maybe it's good to think, do we get along with them? Do we resonate with them? Now, on the flip side, Max, if I can move to that person who doesn't have or just doesn't yet think that they have a budget to putting toward somebody else doing all their post-production, and they're thinking about doing it on their own, and without telling them, hey, you need to work on the business, not in it, without like hurting their feelings and telling them that right now, if they're set on it and that's where their budget is and that's where their mindset is today, how do we make them be better at post-production? How do we help them to get to the next level and be as good as you?
Yeah, that's a very fundamental time when you kind of have that leap forward. You're like, all right, I'm going to start my own podcast. Let's do this thing. It's really, really important before you officially launch the thing to practice. And it sounds funny, but one of the first things you need to do is buy your microphone, because until you get that microphone, you're not fully used to talking into a microphone. And as you were saying earlier, Adam, it's incredibly important to talk in your normal, conversational, everyday voice, because that's what's going to resonate with your listeners. And so get that microphone, start doing some test episodes. I would say do that early on. And not only will that help you get used to talking into a microphone, but when you listen back to it, first of all, you'll get used to the sound of your own voice, which is like a first hurdle you need to get over, because that's you're going to hear your own voice a lot, and nobody likes the sound of their own voice, but you'll get used to it quick. The second part is you will start to teach yourself a little bit about editing. So if you're just doing 5 or 10-minute test episodes before officially record your official episodes, those are 5 to 10-minute little snippets, little mini episodes that you can go into, whether you're using Audacity, GarageBand, Pro Tool, whatever you use. You can go in and start feeling out, getting a little bit familiar with the editing software and getting used to, okay, all right, well, this is, I should take this part out, or this part I ignore, or this I have to change the volume. So it's a really quick crash course. And what's beautiful is you're not depending on anybody else for that. I mean, you're literally making the content yourself, and then you're editing yourself. So it's all, it comes down to how much time, effort you want to put into it. But you don't need to record these super long episodes off the bat to help yourself get comfortable with the hosting side as well as the editing side.
That's really good stuff. I've noticed when I've edited my own podcast, actually, I edited probably my first 300 episodes, and it wasn't because I couldn't afford it. We could afford it. It's just every time that I gave it to another person, whether it was in my company, an employee, or trying to hire it out to the Philippines or whatever at the time. And now I've got it all mapped out and perfected. But in the beginning, I was always unhappy with other people's quality of the podcast. And so I did it grudgingly. I actually tried to give it off 4 different times, and I ended up taking it back just because I got so frustrated with the mistakes. And I know that definitely happens. But one of the things, if I could say that there's a blessing from doing my own editing of my podcast, is I'm not eloquent. I'm not trying to act like I'm eloquent or pretend that I have a doctorate in English or anything like that.
Right. Which you do, though. I did see your CV earlier, but that's all right.
I guess the point that I'm trying to make is I learned something about myself because I edited my own show. So it wasn't all bad. And I learned about filler words and okay, so. Okay, so is, I still do that one a lot. It's when I'm trying to switch topics. I'm like, okay, so, and then I say the other thing, but I didn't need to say that. I didn't need to say or okay, so. I just need to say the thing. And what I learned is when I'm starting to cringe, you mentioned you cringe a little bit at your own voice. We all do. I don't know what it is, but nobody just like loves their own voice. We always think we sound better in our heads than we do on our show. The point is, with me, as I was having to cut some of these out, I started to learn how to get rid of filler words so I don't use them as much in life anymore because I just kind of learned it. And what I've learned is that you can just pause when you're talking. It actually sounds really good to just have a break instead of having an or an or a or a okay so. And if you have that pause and you're editing the podcast, it's pretty easy to cut longer pauses out anyway. So I started to learn a little bit of that, and I thought that that might be the biggest blessing from editing my own show. Can you pinpoint any blessings on your side from doing your own post-production?
Hey, my friend, as you know, this episode is sponsored by my company, GrowYourShow.com. We want you to be able to have the best tools at your disposal without costing you a whole arm and a leg. So right now you can get a free list of vetted equipment that like mics, mixers, webcams, sound treatment, editing software, everything that you need. I created the whole PDF with direct purchase links just to save you time and money, to help it be more convenient for you. So this free PDF will help you skip all the guesswork. If it's on there, it's vetted and approved by yours truly. And if it's not on there, it's probably not worth the money. So go ahead and get yours at growyourshow.com/PDF. Let's get back into the show.
Yeah, I'll echo those. The filler words and the pause aspect are definitely areas where the more you edit yourself, especially the more you edit episodes, the more you listen back, you can even recognize visually what that looks like in the editing software you're using. So it can speed things up a bit when you can anticipate, all right, well, this, I have to click here, here, here. I have to get rid of these areas. And those are really key. I think an overall theme of listening back to yourself, of editing yourself, is you're coaching yourself. And there's something really special about giving yourself constructive criticism where you're teaching yourself, and you can feel yourself growing as you do this for more and more episodes. And you can feel these skills you're learning. And then, flash forward and, 30, 40, 50 episodes. If you go back and listen to one of your early episodes, you will be blown away by how much you've improved, how much more polished you are from a speaking standpoint. You mentioned earlier the value of speaking in your normal voice and just being comfortable on the microphone. And I always think back when I started Wild Business Growth Podcast, I kind of felt it was my first time really ever speaking into a mic. And I felt the need to project like you're presenting and to speak like an announcer, things like that, and be like, hey, welcome. And I clearly just took it too far. And I look back, and it legitimately took me 30 episodes to start talking like my normal self. Think about that. 30 episodes to start sounding like how I automatically sound to begin with. So it's, podcasting does funny things to you, but the more you listen to yourself early on, and especially if you do edit yourself early on and edit your episodes, you can, quote unquote, nip those things in the bud earlier and grow as a podcaster quicker.
Yeah. And I will say, for the person who has the funds to be able to put this off and hire a company, a post-production company, I would recommend that you go ahead and do it. We've given you some feedback on how to do that even better. You don't have to edit your own show to learn that you're doing ums and uhs. You will learn that from listening to your episode anyway. You will learn how you're sounding. It's just that you're so involved with it, you can't not do it. So you can still get there. Don't worry. And it might not take you 30 episodes. I do personally think that my first 20 or so episodes were horrible compared to now. Like back then when I did my first 20, I was like, this is so awesome. And then as I started learning a little bit as I go, I started being a little bit more critical of the old episodes. But because on my first podcast, the one that we had like over 500 episodes, you don't even have the old episodes don't even show up anymore because there's so many. iTunes really only has the first 300 or the most recent 300. So there's all of those ones that I used to cringe about, they're gone. So no worries there. Because I'm going to transition to asking you 3 major things that I think are definitely going to help the listener to be able to be a better podcaster overall. And so you as a podcaster, I want to find out of all of the mistakes that you have made and overcome, that's a critical piece to this question. You have to have overcome it. So out of all of the mistakes, the hardships, the struggles that you've had within podcasting and found a way to overcome, what was kind of the worst one that you can point out and, your Rocky Balboa way of overcoming that challenge?
Which is funny because I'm starring in Rocky 12 coming out next year. But the biggest glaring mistake that I look at since I started podcasting, I think at the beginning, I was really, really diligent about show notes and having blog posts on the website, which at the time, at the start was a Hippo Direct website, having keyword rich, SEO focused, blog posts with with show notes to drive traffic back to the site every time you release a podcast episode. And I'm sure you've heard the analogy, but everybody says in the social media world that these social media platforms, they're borrowed real estate. I know you have a real estate background. They're borrowed real estate, whereas your website is actually, it's your property. You own it. You can do whatever you want with it. So you want to drive people back to your website, whatever website you're promoting with your podcast or what ties back to it. And I was really diligent about these blog posts for every episode at the start. And then somewhere around episode, it was the late 40s and maybe episode 50, I just got behind. And instead of doing a new blog post for every single week and having that ready the day that the episode is released or the day after the episode is released, next thing I knew, I was a week behind. Then I was 2 weeks behind. Then I was 3 months behind, 4 months behind. Eventually I got an entire year behind on show notes. And at that time, it just turned out that I was starting, this new company, MaxPodcasting. And as opposed to catching up on all the show notes there, I just started fresh with the most recent guests and did that on the new site. And so I think there was that big gap there. I really wish that I did the blog posts, I did the show notes for each of those just during the week, even the night before that the episode is released, because if you stay consistent with it, you stay ahead of it, then you're not going to slip behind. If you let it slip even 1 week behind, it's a very slippery slope there. I'm going to set a record for using the word slip, but it's a very slippery slope there, falling all the way behind. And I think what has helped me more as of late was being really diligent about, hey, this is not acceptable to, delay these show notes even a day or so. Like I'm working it into part of my routine with my own podcast that before I even publish the official episode to the RSS feed and out to, Apple Podcast, Spotify, everywhere, I want to have at least a pretty well finished draft of those show notes on my site. So then the next morning I can just put on some finishing touches and it's easy to finish that and share it out. And then all of a sudden you have a blog post every single day, you have a new podcast episode and you're on top of it. So it's more kind of going back to coaching yourself and holding yourself accountable. And if you keep that as part of your routine, that's a great way to stay on top of it.
A lot of good stuff unpacked there. I like the part where you said that, some of these social media sites are borrowed real estate, meaning that they can change their algorithms at any time. Your real goal is to drive people to your website. So I think that's a good thing for the listener to pull out of that, thinking when they have their own podcast, that they shouldn't be thinking that this is kind of the end all be all. Really, we need to find a way to drive that traffic to our own website so that those people can be part of our program, our inner circle, you know what I mean? And what I think can do it, a way to do that, which might not be where you were getting, or maybe it was, is things like lead magnets, or this is where you go to download this PDF or this checklist. Having a way to actually convert the listener into working with you, into getting something for free from you, even if you have to give them dangle a carrot in front of their nose where you say, take advantage of this free thing, and you have to go to my website to do it and maybe even give me your email address for it. I think that's really valuable. The other thing that I got from what you said is that feeling of being behind the eight ball, where you don't have those show notes ready. You don't have that next. In some cases, this wasn't in your case, but many of the listeners have experienced this if they have a podcast, or might experience this if they don't listen to this one thing. And what that is, when you have people coming on your show, you want to make sure that you're never behind the eight ball. Ways of fixing that is to make sure that you record more episodes then you need to publish. So one thing that we do is I always have at least 12 episodes sitting in the can, or you can call it a bank account, a savings account. I like to have at least 12, sometimes more, because when you mentioned with me, I have an investment background, real estate investing in particular. I think it's important when we look at finances that we need to have a few months of expenses. And that's the same thing that I'm talking about, not being behind the eight ball with these types of things, making sure you have enough episodes in the can that if you go on vacation to Hawaii and then you get COVID in Hawaii and you have 2 weeks that you have to take off, and then you have a week where you're so far behind in work that you just got to get it done, and then you have emergency gallbladder surgery right after that, and that's 2 months completely off. And this is a true story. Corey Peterson is one of my clients, and he had to take almost that amount of time off. And so he got behind the eight ball. Wouldn't it have been nice if he had 12 episodes ready to go in the can or in his savings account, ready to go whenever he needed it? And that feeling of being behind the eight ball, for you, Max, you were lucky because you pivoted your business from the Hippo to the MaxPodcasting.com. And it was like a perfect opportunity for you to get back into it and recommit. For the listener, we don't always have that experience where we can just ignore all of these episodes that have piled up. So I liked how you also said you really have to be diligent, especially if you're doing it on your own. If you have a company that does all of this stuff, then maybe just record the episodes and let them take care of it. I've got so many more questions and not very much time to do it in. So I think we're going to have to keep our answers a bit short because I still want to ask them. So the next question is, what's something that you still struggle with today? Like, what is something of podcasting that's still a bane in your existence? You might hate doing it, or you're bad at doing it. You haven't offloaded it, or it's just something that isn't at the quality that you want. What's something that you're still struggling with? And then the last question there is going to go on to, what do you love about podcasting? What's your favorite thing about podcasting? So let's start with what you might be struggling with today.
A thing that's always a struggle for me and has become more of a struggle. It's funny because I love social media and I'm someone who used to be on social media every single day in a crazy amount. Like, I don't even want to tell you how many hours a day I was on social media. And a lot of it was, making connections with people in the business world and the marketing world. So it served a business purpose as well. But there's a lot of distracting stuff on there. There's a lot of entertaining things going on. There's all sorts of stuff on social media. Anyway, social media for me has turned into more and more of a catch-22 because I personally am someone who believes that social media should always be in your own voice. And I never want to offload social media and the things I post. And I've resisted automating for the longest time because I always want it to be in my own voice. And I want somebody, whether they see a tweet or an Instagram post or a new story, I want my followers and people in my network to know that that's coming from me. I want it to always be that way. So I haven't even really considered automating it or offloading it, the task of that. What I do find is sharing out your podcast episode. I mean, you can never share out a new podcast episode enough on social media. So it can get quite time consuming. So for me, that's a catch-22. And I'm talking about my own podcast, Wild Business Growth here. Like, I make sure for a new podcast episode, I share it out everywhere. Like, even, as more and more, as LinkedIn embraces stories, as Twitter embraces fleets, all sorts of different ephemeral content. I can never say that word right, but all sorts of content mediums like that. I make sure that the podcast is out there and spread the word about the new episode. And part of that is to get the word out, but also part of that is I want to make sure that my guest feels valued and supported and that their story is getting, the coverage that it deserves. But it's just, social media for me is something that you want to have it in your own voice, but also it can take a long time to share it out across all these different platforms. So what can you do to make that more efficient while still keeping it in your own voice? That's kind of an ongoing challenge from my end.
Makes sense. I'm glad you went into that. So, what's something that you love about podcasting? Like, what are you most passionate about behind this role?
I am a very curious and person who enjoys being fascinated and wowed. And so I could have conversations for hours and hours and hours. Now, as far as the production of it goes, I haven't even considered that. I didn't want to be somebody who did interviews that were 3, 4, 5 hours long. And then, it's just such a big commitment to listen to it as well as produce it. But my favorite part is being able to connect with so many just fascinating people and inspiring people around the world. And literally, I've had weeks where I interviewed somebody from Singapore one week, and the next week I'm talking to somebody from Zimbabwe. I've had weeks where I'm talking to somebody in Canada, then I'm talking to somebody really close to my home, all through the internet, really. And the fact that the world is so much more connected, and podcasting is a way to speak to and learn from people all around the world, but also it gives you an opportunity, if you go about it the right way, to interview some people that you never would be able to get in touch with and that you just kind of previously thought were untouchable. And for you to have a conversation with them and kind of unlock those key moments that your listener can hear and go, "Oh wow, that's amazing," or, "Oh wow, I should try that. This is something I could use in my life and my business to make it better." That's really, really, really cool. And the icing on the cake is that, whether you are focused on video or just audio for your podcast, the fact that podcasting kind of inherently from the start is an audio first medium, it's so cool that your listeners can soak in these stories, soak in these amazing conversations while they're doing something else. It's not a huge commitment for them to listen to it and to learn these things. So I just think there's that kind of spark, there's that magic in podcasting that no other medium can compete with in that realm.
One of the things that I think that the listener can really learn from you in particular is getting the 5-star ratings and reviews that you've been able to achieve. And I say this because I understand, as somebody who helps people with podcasting, I have a lot of experience with metrics, and I want the listener to know how big of a deal it is to have 133 ratings. It's huge. So, are you paying for them? Are you asking for them? Are you calling friends for them? What are you doing differently that's getting you so many more than most of us?
I appreciate it. The ratings is a funny thing because I think for me, it's always gone back to effort and how much energy you put into it. So I've never paid for a rating. The way I look at ratings is you have an opportunity every single week to reach out to somebody and talk about your podcast. You can ask your network for ratings and reviews and send them a link and be like, "Hey, this goes a great way to help out from a word of mouth standpoint." And so, some of those ratings are organic, and people, listeners, as somebody who's just been enjoying the show for a long time will surprise you with a rating and review. And that's always really, really nice. And as far as actually building it at a steady pace, I mean, think about if you have an interview show each week, you can ask your guest. Now, it won't always feel right to ask your guest, but sometimes it might be fair game, especially if they have a podcast on their own and you leave them review as well. It's kind of like a fair trade there. But I make a point, and I do the same thing with reaching out to guests. I make a point every single week to reach out to, on the rating side, it's usually 2 people a week that I'll reach out and say, "Hey, would you mind leaving a review for the podcast?" This goes a long, long way as far as just kind of the credibility, as you alluded to, and just the presentation when somebody sees that and goes, "Oh, wow." It goes a long way. And I do the same thing with guests. Is I make a point to reach out to 5 potential guests every single week. And like you, I like to keep, 1 to 2 months of wiggle room there to make sure I'm ahead. You never have that unnecessary stress of finding guests last minute. But I just want to make sure. But if it does ever get tighter, I'll reach out to 10 guests in a week just to stay on top of that. So you don't need to do everything all at once. If you take it week by week, you could just take a little bit of time each and every week to work on ratings and reviews or to work on potential guests, things like that. And it goes a long way. And then eventually you'll be happy with the ratings you get. And it's great. It's especially great when you're reaching out to potential guests and they see all those 5-star ratings there.
For sure. For sure. Really good stuff. I love the advice. My takeaway is if we want to have more ratings and reviews, we need to really take it to heart that we can't just sit there and wait for it to happen. We should make it happen. And for you, what you've been doing is reaching out to new potential listeners on social, check it out, etc. Friends and family. Hey, will you do me a favor? Leave a honest review on the show. It'll help a lot. And third, podcast guests who have been on the show, you're doing two tricky things, sneaky, cool, tricky things, where first, you're giving them a rating and a review, and the reciprocity is almost impossible. It's a law for a reason. Law of reciprocity. You say a compliment to somebody else. You say, hey, I love your hair today. And they look at, and they're like, oh yeah, nice blouse. Or, oh, and those are sweet pants. Or I love your shoes. Or thanks, you're looking healthy today. Have you lost some weight? As soon as you give that compliment, it has to be reciprocated. It's a law. And for you, one of the tricks is some of your listeners or some of your guests are podcasters, and you're giving them a rating and review, and it's so difficult for them to not spend the time. But the other thing is that you're asking for it. You're saying, hey, thanks for coming on the show. If you wouldn't mind, throw me an honest rating and review. And then they'll take care of that. And now, and to some listener, they might have 300 ratings and they'll be like, I'm already way past that, so whatever. But for most listeners, the truth is you probably have somewhere between 10 and 30 ratings, because that's the average podcast. And 10 of them are your family, and the other maybe 20 are people that you hardly know. So learned a lot from you, Max. Thank you for coming on the show. I've already got you the link to your show in the show notes, so you don't have to worry about that. What's the best way for the listener to find you and get a hold of you?
Perfect. Yeah. Well, you can email me directly at max@maxpodcasting.com, or just check out maxpodcasting.com.
Done and done. Thank you, Max. Have a good rest of your day. Sorry we went over. I better let you go in case you have another appointment.
You're good. Thank you so much, Adam. That
Thanks,
was great.
Until next time, grow your podcast, grow your influence, and grow your business.
If you're glad that you checked out the podcast today, if you got some value out of this episode, some actionable takeaways, I invite you to do one of three things. A, you could do a written review on Apple. Let us know what you think. Just an honest written review. B, you could share the podcast with a friend of yours who needs it. Or C, at the very least, implement what you've learned to take your business and your podcast to the next level. And I'll see you on the next episode.